We'll be getting started in a second. Let's see how the acoustics are in here first. We'll be getting started in a second. Oh, jeez. Where's it with my voice? Why can't I find a microphone that... We'll be getting started in just a moment. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Oh God, I was asleep most of the day. Well, right here we've got a map of Greece. We've got Troy, Marathon, Athens, Mycenae, Delphi, Olympia, Sparta, Knossos, how do you pronounce that? Halicarnassus, and Ephesus, right there. So carrying on. Right here you've got the monuments and mysteries menu, so you could go to a family of gods, wonders of the Greek world, Greeks today. Basically you could get anywhere if it was related to the subject. Oh yeah, it's definitely the acoustics in the dining room. Not any better than the acoustics in the den. Right here we've got the menu for people in politics. So again, you could just choose the subjects you wanted and go to it. Next up is the chronology of Greece. So it starts with the Neolithic. Oh, screw this, I'm turning a light on. Let there be light. You got the Neolithic settlements on Crete. The metal in common use in early towns metal in common use, early towns forming. Troy founded. The rise of Minoan culture, first palaces built. Pictographic writing begins on Crete. Linear A first appears on Crete. Earthquake damages Minoan palaces. Grander ones are built. That's... Wow, thanks when we haven't changed tablet. Earthquake wrecks building. Better building built. That's basically the history of earthquakes in cities. Mycenaean culture reaches its height. Trojan... No, that's not right. 1194 BC. It ended in 1184 BC. Dorian invasions begin. Oh wait, Knossos burns down. Well, anyway, carrying on. With the chronology of Greece, Temple of Hera is built at Olympia. Rise of Sparta. Greek script, Eastern Phoenician alphabet appears. First Olympic Games. Archaic Greece. Epic poems Iliad and Odyssey first appear. Solon begins political reform in Athens. Classical age of Greece. Persians defeated at Marathon. Alexander conquers Persia. Oh wait, you have the Peloponnesian War before that, and Philip conquers Athens, becomes ruler of Greek world. Hellenistic period. Achaean War. Romans defeat the Macedonians and impose Roman rule. And finishing with the chronology of Greece. Ptolemy of Greece makes first map of known world. Goths capture Athens, destroy Sparta. Because Sparta's garbage. Greece becomes part of Byzantine Empire. Bulgarian invasion of Greece. Normans gain control of Ionian Islands. And yeah, that's the chronology of Greece. So carrying on, we've got well, another menu. Hold on. This is the menu for work and play. Hold on 1 minute. So basically, again with the subject, there's a lot of other subjects. Go to work and play and you could reach one of these. Of course, it's also the index, so there's multiple ways to reach a subject you're interested in. Sparta, about 160 kilometers southwest of Athens. A city of philosophers and magnificent temples lay Sparta, a land of fierce, tough warriors. Spartans lived in a rigidly controlled society, always ready for war. Every male citizen served in the army from boyhood until old age, and women were encouraged to have many children to supply Sparta with soldiers. Once, when someone asked a Spartan king why his country had no walls to protect it, the king pointed to the crowds of citizens and said, "These are the walls of Sparta." A Spartan childhood. Children grew up quickly in Sparta. All infants were examined, and sick, weak babies were abandoned in the wilderness. Boys who were judged fit enough were taken from their parents at age 7 and sent to a military school. At training camp, boys were given little, just bad food and thin clothing. They had no shoes, even in winter, and they slept on hard beds. They were encouraged to steal food to keep from starving. However, those who got caught were severely punished, not for stealing, but for being captured. A cruel contest. Spartan boys weren't supposed to show any emotion. They endured ripping contests to see who could suffer the most punishment without screaming. Some boys, unwilling to cry out, were beaten to death. Fierce fighters. Spartans fought in tight formations, presenting a solid wall to the enemy. They relied mainly on spears to attack, but they were also equipped with short swords. The hard discipline of their lifelong military training helped Spartan men fight to the death, fearlessly, with great skill. In 500 years, the Spartan army lost only a few battles. Coat of arms. Spartan soldiers probably wore bright red cloaks. Long ranks of Spartans, draped in scarlet, must have been a terrifying sight to enemy soldiers. A woman's role. In most parts of Greece, girls were kept inside the home, but Spartan girls, like their brothers, were trained for an outdoor life. They didn't learn to fight, but they were trained in running, wrestling, discus throwing, and other sports that would make them strong and healthy. The authorities wanted to make sure that girls would grow up to have strong, healthy babies. In the lead, this Spartan girl's short skirt allowed her to run and move freely. But such a revealing dress would have shocked people from other parts of Greece. Sparta versus Athens. Athens and Sparta should have been allies against Persia and other common enemies. Sparta had the best army in the land. Athens had built a great fleet of warships. But these two city-states argued constantly and made alliances against one another with other countries. Finally, they went to war against each other. The Peloponnesian War, as it is now called, was a disastrous conflict that left both sides weak and vulnerable to outsiders. Who's who? Athenian and Spartan troops used similar weapons and battle tactics. But in battles in which the armies met on land, the Spartans always won. It always seems to be in this portrayal of Sparta being Canada or Scotland or the southern United States, and Athens being England or the northern United States or the United States in general. You know, if we Canadians are better than Sparta ever was, and so is Scotland. Willpower. Sparta demanded extraordinary willpower from its citizens. Even children always had to show how tough they were. One famous story tells of a Spartan boy who stole a fox. When he was caught, he hid the fox under his tunic. The fox, desperate to escape, started scratching and clawing. But the boy, determined to keep it hidden, would not cry out or let it go. In the end, he let the fox gnaw through his stomach rather than admit he'd stolen it. I'm familiar with that story. Well, be back in just one moment. Thinkers and storytellers. People have always told stories. Those of the ancient Greeks are among the oldest known today. Some stories were based on real events. Others were imaginary tales that explained the past and helped citizens build a better society. In fact, Greek playwrights, historians, and philosophers, people like Thucydides, Socrates, and Plato, defined what the Western world today calls drama, history, and philosophy. The inventors of history. Legends tell the most exciting and dramatic part of what happened, but they don't always tell the whole story. History tries to describe events as truthfully and completely as it can. The idea may seem obvious today, but no ancient writer had ever attempted to give a factual and detailed account of events as they really happened until a man named Herodotus told the story of the wars between the Greeks and Persians. Eyewitness account. Another Greek historian, Thucydides, wrote about the Peloponnesian Wars. He fought in the war and tried to make sure his first-hand account was factual. Thucydides also tried to explain the causes and consequences of important events. Poets and playwrights. Poetry and plays. for the ancient Greeks, these arts were more than just enjoyable entertainment. Drama and epic poems dealt with important political questions and were often part of sacred religious festivals. Playwrights like Sophocles created characters and made up stories to show people the cost of pride, the value of laws, and the tragedy of war. These timeless stories are still performed today, sometimes in the same ancient theaters where audiences first saw them. Poetic truth. Perhaps the most famous poet of all time is Homer, author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. These epic poems tell the story of the Greek siege of Troy and the voyage home from that city of Odysseus, a Greek warrior. The great teacher. The ideas of Socrates, the most famous philosopher and teacher in ancient Greece, would be lost if one of his students, Plato, hadn't taken good notes. In his quest for the truth, Socrates wandered through the marketplace in Athens, debating anyone who would join him. Socrates was never afraid to say what he thought, and eventually some of his ideas cost him his life. The Athenian government accused him of corrupting young people and introducing new gods. They sentenced him to death and forced him to commit suicide. To hear some of Socrates' ideas, click the button. Just hold on one moment. Hold on one moment. What? No. That's not.
Poverty is the partner of revolution and crime. Even when laws have been written down, they ought not always to remain unaltered. Poetry is something more philosophical and is worthy of more serious attention than history.
One of the most learned men in ancient Greece was Aristotle, a student of Plato's. He wrote about subjects ranging from philosophy and science to art and drama. He was also the tutor of Alexander the Great. To hear some of Aristotle's ideas, click the play button.
Learning from the greatest teacher in ancient Greece wasn't anything like going to school today. He didn't even have a classroom. Socrates didn't even write down his thoughts. When students asked Socrates a question.
What the hell?
False words are not only evil in themselves, but they infect the soul with evil. The unexamined life is not worth living.
Okay, so I got the two mixed up. This should have been Socrates and the other should have been Plato. This was... forget it. Developing democracy. In its early days, Athens was ruled by a group of people called Archons. Archons, who were chosen by landowners. Poor people had no rights or power. A person could even be executed for stealing a loaf of bread. Conflicts between the classes eventually threatened to bring about revolt. So an Archon named Solon changed the laws to protect the poor and prevent revolution. Every citizen became a member of the assembly. Another leader, Cleisthenes, took Solon's idea further and gave the assembly the power to banish anyone who threatened liberty. Pericles. Poets called this great leader Onion Head. That may explain why he was never portrayed without a helmet on his head. Athens flourished during the time of Pericles. He won the support of the people, rebuilt the city, and made Athens into a great power. Math and science. The early Greeks believed the gods ran the universe. Everything from wars to romance was explained by the actions of gods like Athena and Aphrodite. But during the 6th century BC, Greek thinkers started looking for other explanations. They were certain that logical and predictable causes lay behind events. By asking questions and making observations, they discovered important principles of mathematics, biology, physics, astronomy, and geography. Magic in numbers. To the philosopher Pythagoras, mathematics was a religion. He believed that numbers represented order and harmony in the universe. He is most famous today for the Pythagorean theorem, a foundation of modern geometry. I think after temples and palaces I may finish up. I may finish shortly. Temples and palaces. Preparing for battle, getting married, giving birth to a child. For the ancient Greeks, such events called for sacrifices to the gods. Sometimes people made offerings at shrines in their homes or neighborhoods. On the most important occasion, however, they visited a temple dedicated to a god such as Zeus, Poseidon, or Artemis. From the magnificent Acropolis in Athens to the more modest shrines in the smallest village, the Greeks built religious monuments that are still admired for their Greeks built religious monuments that are still admired for their grace and beauty. What the hell was that? The Sacred Games. The sacred city of Olympia was home to a great temple dedicated to Zeus, the king of the gods. Almost 2,300 years ago, the Greeks began gathering there for a festival and for religious ceremonies to honor Zeus. These were no ordinary rituals. Zeus deserved more spectacular rites. The Greeks honoured him with a great athletic competition, a contest that continues today as the Olympic Games. Home of the gods. The ancient Olympics were held to honour Zeus, who the Greeks believed lived on snow-capped Mount Olympus with the other gods. Building a temple. With only simple cranes, the strength of oxen, and heavy ropes, the ancient Greeks built some of the most beautiful and spectacular monuments ever constructed. To erect the walls, workers carefully hoisted huge blocks of cut marble into place. Tall columns rose as craftsmen precisely stacked circular blocks of stone. A forest of columns. The Temple of Athens was one of the largest temples of its kind. Most monuments had only a single row of columns, so the multiple rows in this building made it unusual. A shrine to Athena. High on a bluff above Athens, the Greeks built a complex of temples dedicated to the gods. Together, these temples are known as the Acropolis, which means high city in Greek. The most famous monument was the Parthenon, built in honor of Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, and the protector of the city. Inside the temple was a huge golden statue of Athena. A magnificent carved marble frieze ran all along the top of the walls. Brilliantly painted, it showed soldiers on horseback, animals, and women in a religious procession. Pillars of strength. The Acropolis was also home to a smaller temple, dedicated to a Greek hero, Erechtheus. Marble statues of women called caryatids held up the roof of the temple's porch. A style to copy. Even after 2,500 years, people still create buildings with the perfect proportions and graceful columns designed by the ancient Greeks. The Romans adopted the Greek style for many of their buildings, and today when plans call for a monument to a Greek leader, architects often look back to the ancient Greeks for inspiration. Monument to an emperor. In ancient Rome, emperors were often revered as gods worthy of great temples. This monument was dedicated to the Emperor Augustus and his wife Livia. An island palace. One of the largest and most elaborate temples in the ancient world was built by the Minoans on the island of Crete. Today, no one is certain just how the palace of Knossos was used, but it probably was both a place for worship and home to thousands of people, including the Minoan king. Today, the palace is remembered in legends as the home of the mysterious half-man, half-bull called the Minotaur. Dazzling decorations. The Minoans covered their buildings with bright wall paintings called frescoes. The paintings showed rituals such as dancing and bull leaping, and sea creatures like dolphins and fish. Mystery Woman. This statue was found at Knossos. The woman might be a goddess or just a priestess. Speaking to the gods. The Greeks believed that Apollo, the god of light and healing, foretold the future through priestesses at his temple at Delphi. For centuries, people journeyed from all over Greece to leave offerings at the temple. A priestess, surrounded by vapors that rose from deep down in the temple, mumbled mysterious answers to their questions. A sad fate. Today, these ruins are all that remain of Apollo's temple at Delphi, but it still attracts many tourists who use the same road that people once traveled to speak with Apollo's oracle. Gods of the temple. Every Greek home had an altar dedicated to a household god, and every village had a shrine to its special god. Pleasing the great gods who lived on Mount Olympus, however, required more than just a simple shrine. From the Acropolis in Athens to the temple at Delphi, the Greeks built gleaming marble monuments to Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and Poseidon, and woe to any mortal who did not show proper respect to the sacredness of the temples. Home for the gods. A gleaming statue of a god often stood at the center of a temple. Such a statue was once enshrined in the temple of Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon. Well, looks like we get to end on a movie. Gods among men. In one famous story, Zeus and his wife Hera made a bet on whether a human named Jason would succeed in a fabulous adventure. During his journey, Jason met many dangers, but either Hera or another god was usually there to help him out. To see how Poseidon helped Jason sail through dangerous waters, click the play button and watch a scene from Jason and the Argonauts. That's actually not Poseidon, it's his son Triton. It's a good movie. You should see it, but there's a more faithful mini-series that was done by Hallmark in 2000. I said I'd end early. Maybe I won't. Yes, sir, maybe I won't. Or maybe I should. No, not Twitch. There we go. Timetable of the Greek world. Ancient Greece, when people hear the phrase... Ancient Greece. When people hear the phrase, many of them think of temples and philosophers. This is the Greeks of classical times. But Greek civilization extends back thousands of years before that period. It starts not in Athens, but with a mysterious people who lived on the island of Crete. Continuation of the timetable, so we know just how much subjects will be covered in this part. Minoans. Long before Athens became the center of Greek culture, a people called the Minoans created an extraordinary civilization on Crete. They built grand palaces, including the legendary mansion at Knossos. Tantalizing clues, including beautiful poetry and written tablets, proved they had developed an advanced culture and spread it throughout the Mediterranean. But after about 500 years, the Minoans simply disappeared. Did earthquakes and floods, as legend said, destroy their civilization? The truth revealed. For nearly 4,000 years, the remains of the Minoan culture lay buried and almost forgotten. Then, in the late 19th century, an archaeologist named Sir Arthur Evans finally uncovered the palace at Knossos, and scholars began to piece together the true story of the Minoans. Mycenaeans. After the collapse of the Minoan civilization, the Mycenaeans spread their culture and language from the mainland of Greece to the western edge of Asia Minor. According to legends about the Trojan War, the Mycenaeans were tough warriors led by kings like the legendary Agamemnon. Famine, earthquakes, and the Dorian invasion finally ended the Mycenaean age. Commercial conquests. The stories of Homer made Mycenaean warriors famous, but most Mycenaeans were farmers or traders who exchanged fine pottery, bronze, and other valuables with people throughout the ancient Mediterranean world. Fighting the Persians. For over 40 years, the Greeks struggled against the mighty Persian army. At the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, an army of 10,000 Greek soldiers defeated a Persian force thrice as large. It seemed that the Greeks had secured their homeland, but 10 years later, the Persians sacked Athens and crushed an outnumbered but valiant Spartan army at Thermopylae. A decisive battle against the Persians took place at sea soon after the destruction of Athens. Final victory. The Greeks weakened the Persian military by destroying its navy at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. Final victory came the following year at the Battle of Plataea, where a combined force of Athenian and Spartan troops routed a huge Persian army, but it would be another 30 years before Greece and Persia finally declared peace between each other. Archaic Greece. No one knows what happened in Greece between the Dorian invasion and the rise of Athens. The strongholds of the Mycenaeans collapsed into ruin. Traditional arts seemed almost to disappear. Then, about 3,000 years ago, Greek culture revived. Glorious art and pottery shows that the artisans rediscovered ancient skills. The traders made contact with other cultures, and new Greek city-states grew quickly throughout the Aegean. Ancient heritage. Some traditions from the archaic period in Greece continue even today. The first Olympic Games were held in 776 BC, soon after Greek culture emerged from its dark age. The rise of Sparta. Two events frightened the Spartans so much that they created a social system dedicated to making everyone a warrior. First, they lost a war. Then, the Messenians, a people they had conquered, started a revolt against them. From that time on, every male Spartan spent his life in the military. And all the Spartan people lived hard, frugal lives to support their mighty army and navy. Cultural casualties. Sparta transformed itself into an armed state. The government made sure its citizens devoted all their energy to the military. There was little room for philosophy or the arts in Sparta. Rise of Athens. The Parthenon, the great temple to Athena, symbolized all that the citizens of Athens admired. It was home to the goddess of wisdom and art, law and order, war, and the power of the thunderbolt. Proud Athenians thought their city was the center of commerce, culture, and learning. Protected by the wooden wall of their strong navy, they felt secure. Powers of the mind. Pythagoras never visited Athens, but the ideas of this philosopher and his followers stirred passionate debates in the marketplace and academies of Athens. Classical Greece. Much of what people admire today about the culture of ancient Greece was created in a burst of creativity and energy that scholars call the Classical period. Vividly painted statues and natural poses made sculpture seem to come alive. People throughout the Mediterranean prized fine vase paintings and other creations of Athenian artisans. Artistic legacy. The buildings and sculpture of classical Athens were models for artists from Roman times through the Renaissance and into the modern era. The Peloponnesian War. Sparta and Athens thought alliances with other city-states would protect them, but the treaties only drew them into a war that dragged on for 27 years and tore Greece apart. Sparta eventually won the Peloponnesian War, but it was a bitter victory. The Spartans soon lost control of Athens, and without the strength of Athens and Sparta to maintain the peace, wars quickly broke out between other city-states. A new Greek power. Within 50 years of the Peloponnesian War, a small, once unimportant land called Macedonia conquered the crippled city-states and took control of Greece. Rise of Macedonia. Philip made Macedonia into a military power that even the Spartans had to respect. He reorganized the army and trained his soldiers to fight in disciplined ranks. Within this force, he united Macedonia and the Greek city-states and created a league with himself as leader. It was all part of his plan to take the richest prize in the ancient world, the Persian Empire. Murdered leader. Philip never got the chance to fight the Persian king Darius III. He was murdered before he could lead his new army into battle. That task was left to his young son Alexander. Hellenistic Greece. Alexander the Great succeeded where Athens and Sparta, even with all their power, had failed. United by language and culture, the Hellenistic world that Alexander's conquests created saw great advances in the science and arts. One of the cities that bore his name, Alexandria, became a center of learning, trade, and religion in the ancient world. The Dying Gaul. Sculptors in the Hellenistic age modeled life as realistically as possible. They portrayed real people in action, not just stiff, idealized gods, and also showed pain and death in their work. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was just 20 when his father was assassinated, but even at that age he was ready to lead the Macedonian army. He quickly set out on campaigns that crushed his rivals along the Mediterranean coastlines and prepared the way for his assault on the Persian Empire. He led Greek soldiers and administrators behind to rule his new territories. Lasting legacy. Alexander admired other cultures. He even wore Persian clothes and married a Persian woman. He actually married 3. He encouraged his troops to marry local women and founded many cities that flourished as models of ancient that flourished as models of Greek culture. The death of Alexander. Even after defeating the Persians, Alexander wasn't satisfied. He marched his army east toward India. He got as far as the Hydaspes River and defeated an Indian king. Then his very troops rebelled and would go no farther. Forced to turn back, Alexander set out for home. But sickness overtook him in Babylon. There, the greatest military commander of all time, a general who had survived many wounds in battle, died of a fever on his sickbed. End of the empire. Within a few years, Alexander's wife, son, brother, and mother were all murdered. Without a rightful heir, Alexander's empire passed to his generals, who divided it into 4 separate kingdoms. Let's see how my schedule is looking. Okay, that's enough for today. I'm Brian Croydragon signing out. Stay shrey!